Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I've added this tall building to Chandwell's skyline. In this short video I'll show you the steps I went through to make it look like it's far away. And for it to look effective from as many angles on the layout as possible. So let's take a look then at making a building seem far away. Growing up near Bishop Auckland in the 1980s, Vinovium House was the tallest building for miles around. My grandparents simply called it the big house. When I decided to add a tall building to the Chandwell skyline, it was the first thing I could think of. Finished in 1971, it has that ugly brutalism and simple lines that will really suit Chandwell. I'm starting to think about the other side of Market Street, and I'll be making a video about this soon. The biggest decision of the project is where to set the horizon line. Many model railway layouts set it high because you usually look down on the layout, so you'll see more of the buildings behind the ones on the back scene, something like this. But I film Chandwell from low down and I gaze at the layout from a sitting position at my desk. So, at Chandwell, my horizon line is low. This means that you will see very little of the buildings beyond Market Street. A tall building would therefore just poke above the roofs, so I knew I'd only need to model the top 3 or 4 stories. I drew the building using the free drawing application Inkscape. I realised that this one would be really simple. It's just rectangles. Take the top off and these 4 rows are all the same, and they are made of 7 columns, exactly the same. And each one is made up of only 12 independent rectangles. I drew it so that it looks in the right proportion, but without any other consideration of scale. I used Google Maps to measure the length of the side I'd just drawn, 21.72 metres. That's 21,720 millimetres. Divide that by 148 to get it to N scale. That's 146.76 millimetres. Easy. If I just planted the building's front directly onto the back scene, it would look a little strange. It would look okay straight on, but from anywhere to either side, it would obviously be just a flat sticker. So I decided to draw it in 2-point perspective. Drawing a horizon line and vanishing points from the side, I drew shapes and used the perspective tool to fit my drawing into them. Some combinations looked obviously weird, but through trial and error and printed mock-ups, I got to one that worked. From almost any angle, your brain registers that it is looking at a building edge on. From here, and from here, it looks real. But the illusion is ruined if you follow it from here to here. It's really odd. It looks like the building is slowly rotating on its axis as your brain tries to make sense of what it is seeing. It's a simple white building, but I wanted it to look at least a little bit 3D. I used subtle graduated fills on the rectangles to introduce the kind of feeling I was after. I really liked this, but the graduated fill was lost when running the perspective tool, so I needed to colour it in after the perspective distort. I used simple blocks of colour like this. I used a semi-transparent black shape with an overlay blend mode to add a subtle shadow to the short side. I created a copy with blanked out windows. My plan is to cut these out and use 2 layers when making the building. I added a graduated fill to the windows as well. I'm not glazing this building as I think the shiny acetate would ruin any sense of distance. I printed the 2 layers onto photo paper and then carefully cut out the blocked over windows on the top layer. I needed to take care because the frames between these holes are just 0.57 millimetres wide. Once glued on top, I think that the subtle 3D effect of the 2 layers of paper really gives depth to the model. Held in place with a bit of blue tack, I thought I was on the right lines. But this doesn't look like it's in the distance. It looks wrong, too bold, too cartoony. I need to revisit the colouring. After some trial and error with wireframe mock-ups, I settled on a size to make it. It's 70% of true N scale. Things in the distance are not as clear as things in the foreground. It's not just the size. The density of the air affects the light that is reflected off the objects that are farther away. I've not done much research on this, but I've seen myself that distant things have less contrast, are a little bit more blue, and seem lighter. So I set to using a series of overlay filters in Inkscape to lighten the building, tint it ever so slightly blue, and to reduce the contrast. I also noticed that the glazing in distant buildings acts like it has a reflection right across the combined surface. So I added a radial fill to the glazing shape to make it look like the side of the building is reflecting the brighter of the dim Chandwell clouds. Compared to the original, I thought my adjustments might have been a bit extreme. The new one is only a couple of stops away from being completely white. This was only more evident when I printed it out. I stuck the base layer onto a bit of cereal packet and painstakingly cut out the upper frame. In place, I was excited that this was starting to look good. I glued it into place with PVA glue. I popped it onto the back seam with some blue tack. The difference that the new colouring has made is astonishing. It almost blends into the sky, but I think that this really does make it look like it's in the far distance. It just peeks over the rooftops. If you've ever seen pictures of Bishop Auckland, the real thing does appear like this in many shots. I love how it's worked out, and I'm astonished by how drawing it edge on with 2 different vanishing points has made it look right from so many different vantage points. A quick thank you to my channel members for your input as I was sharing progress of this building, and to Don in particular. Your guidance and encouragement on the colouring of things in the distance has been inspiring. I'm not going to have much else peeking out to the rooftops, but I do have lots of plans still for the other side of Market Street. You can see here I've started making some mock-ups, and hopefully I'll have something exciting to share in time for the next video. Here's a look back to last summer when I made this running session you may enjoy. So until my next video, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.